Nick, can you hear me?
A little, but you're breaking up, Maddie. Where are you?
What about now? Can you hear me now? Hey, Steve.
Better hurry. Just hurry up and get to the studio. You gotta start the show.
Can you hear me now?
Of course I can, but you're late. Let's start the show.
Okay, you know what we just did? It kind of reminded me of the cell phone commercials where they're like, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
I know what you're saying. Sometimes when I pray and talk to God, I feel like I'm saying, God, can you hear me now?
And sometimes it's like, is he really listening? Is he there?
I know exactly what you mean. Prayer might feel like we're in between radio stations, hearing mostly static.
Or trying to tune into the right station.
There can be a lot of frustration that accompanies our journey in prayer, as we wonder if we are hearing God.
Does God speak to us in prayer? That's what we'll be talking about today. Hi everyone, I'm Maddie.
And I'm Nick.
And this is Real Faith TV.
God speaks to me mostly through music, and I sing at church, so singing is praying twice.
God speaks to me through everyday life.
Through other people. I believe he answers our prayers through people or through congregation meetings, I guess.
The lessons that he shows me in everyday life.
Through just answering anytime I pray to him, or just at church.
I feel it, like inside.
Do you have conversations with God, or do you usually say more formal prayers?
I pour out my heart as it instructs us to do inside the Bible.
I usually just say prayers before bed.
I normally just have a conversation with them and just pray for stuff and hope for the best.
I usually say more formal prayers.
It's regular conversation, really.
More formal prayers to God than I do conversation-wise.
I usually say more formal prayers because sometimes I don't know what to say.
I talk to him like he's my friend, because I believe he really cares about me and he really loves me.
Welcome back. The teens on the street felt that God does speak to them, though the method wasn't always the same.
Our spotlight guest, Aubrey, didn't have a profound experience of God speaking to her, but she did feel he was giving her specific instructions.
We'll meet her soon, but first, let's meet our studio guests and find out if they have ever experienced God speaking to them.
Okay, today in the studio we have Colin,
Katie,
Monique,
Leanne,
Christian,
and Emily. How does God speak to you?
I think God speaks to me through music. I can remember this one Saturday, I was really angry, and then the next Sunday I went to church, and then they were playing one of my favorite songs, The Prayer of St. Francis, and I felt like that was a message to God that I need to calm down, and I always know that I have him with me.
I think that God speaks to me through others. Like if I have a problem in my life and I'm looking for an answer and I just really can't find one, sometimes my friend will say something to me, or someone I know will say something, and all of a sudden it'll just click and it'll be the answer, and they won't even realize that they just helped me. And I think that's God speaking through them.
I agree with what Colin said about other people. I know for me, my best friends, they're always there for me and they always have my back and they help me through so much. So I think that's God working through them to help me get through difficult situations.
Throughout the Old Testament, people encounter and hear God.
Like when God appears and speaks to Moses in a burning bush.
For most of us, God's voice isn't going to be that dramatic.
Like our spotlight guest, Aubrey. Although it was clear when she heard God speaking to her, it wasn't loud. It was in the quiet and peacefulness of adoration.
God spoke to her after her prayer, where she asked him about his plans for her life.
Next, she describes what it's like to hear God speak to her and how the whole experience gave her a sense of relief.
Our speakers were talking to us about what God's plan was for our lives and what God's will was for our lives. And I think we always kind of plan out what we see our lives like to become. and kind of have our own goals, but then we forget that God has plans for us. And usually that plan ends up being a greater plan than you would have even thought of for yourself. It was during adoration, and we were praying, and I just felt just like a presence of God being there. I knew it was God because I felt a sense of peace, and I just knew instinctively that it was God. Some of my friends have said that they've heard God come to them in different ways and different messages. It depends on the person, but I think God will always find a way to give you signs or messages on what he thinks that the plan is for you. I think that Steubenville and church programs and stuff like that are great ways to build a relationship with God. Before Steubenville, I don't think I would have gotten to this point in my life. Steubenville definitely helped me in so many ways. It's such a great experience and kind of opened me up to Christian music. And before that, I was kind of more worldly. And if you let the world kind of control your life, you're not going to be led to God. You have to take a path different from the world, and you have to seek a Christian faith. You just have to have faith that God will plan out the best possible situation for your life, because he knows you better than you know yourself. And I felt like a sense of relief after that, because you realize that, no matter what you do, God's in control of your life and he has a plan for you.
So have you guys ever taken a step back to hear what God was saying to you?
Well, I, just like Aubrey, I attended the Steubenville conference at the Franciscan University in Steubenville, Ohio. And it's a conference that's held across the country. And so it starts on a Friday and ends on a Sunday. And I took a step back and felt God talking to me during their big adoration night they have on Saturday. And I just felt him say to me, all the struggles that I was feeling at the time and all the times I felt that I had failed, that I wouldn't get back to improve upon them, that everything was going to be okay, and that things might have happened for a reason, and that it wasn't the end of everything in my life. I would have gotten a second chance to make up for those times I lost.
I think a time when I take a step back and retreat is during the holidays, when I'm with my family and all my extended family comes over. Whenever we're standing around and we're about to pray and we're about to eat, I take a step back and think how lucky I am and how blessed I am that God has given me this great family, and that we're blessed to have food like this and that we can celebrate together.
During the good and bad times, especially in good times where you're feeling like your life's, everything's really kind of going well in your life, and you kind of take a step back to just say, wow, acknowledge that everything's going well, thank God. And even in the bad times when you just think you can't find anything positive to think of, you just think, well, God's going to help me get through it.
I also step back in the good and bad times. In the good times, I do step back and look at everything I have. And in the bad times, I also do, and I look at everything that I do have and that I'm grateful for in the bad times, and that kind of lifts me up a little bit.
A time for me when I step back is I took a mission trip to Montana to teach, and I was on an Indian reservation, and it was night. It was 10:30 at night, and the teacher runs in our house and goes, guys, come outside. And we went outside and we looked up in the sky and we saw the aurora borealis, the northern lights, and that was a moment I just was like, whoa. I took a step, I took a breath, and I was like, sometimes God just likes to show off. So it was a moment for me to realize how lucky I am to be living on this earth with all the beautiful people and landscape around me.
I also went on a retreat with my youth group, and we broke into little groups, but then there would be certain times where we'd just break apart into individuals, and we'd all go to a separate place in the room and just write in our journals and reflect on what was happening in our lives, whether it was good things or bad things. And that was kind of my step back to just look at my life and reflect.
I like to take a step back every night when I'm in my room, because it's peaceful and it's dark, and it's just a place where I can get and speak to God. It's just quiet. It's just my little space to myself. It's really easy to take a step back every night and reflect on the day.
Many of us can probably relate more to the prophet Elijah's experience in prayer.
He cried out in frustration to God because things were not going well for him. Enough, Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors.
The Lord sends Elijah to the mountains, away from the noise, the distractions of the town life, and others.
Like Elijah, we need to hear God, and we need to make space for quiet in our own lives.
And get away from the noise of TV and music, technology, and distraction.
Many things happen when Elijah goes to the mountain, like wind, fire, and earthquake, but he does not find the Lord in them.
Finally, he hears the Lord in a still small voice.
And they have a conversation back and forth.
Often, God will speak to us in the same way, in the depths of our hearts.
And we could talk with him about our lives, decisions, hurts, and dreams, and then hear what he has to say.
Next, let's hear from the teens on the street who tell us what they do to hear God's voice.
The things I can do to help me hear God's voice is act in accord with what he commands and the principles that he gives us in the Bible.
Maybe read the Bible more.
I could probably go to church more and just listen to the Bible being read out loud more and just try to hear from his point of view.
Definitely prayer, going to church as much as possible. Being an open person to any and everybody, just being a kind person, and you'll get the same reward back, and you'll definitely hear God's voice.
Be a better person. Pray a lot about what I'm doing and just lean on Him when I need Him.
You can help and hear God's voice through, like, we're on a mission trip right now, so we're trying to help be His voice to the people who were affected by the hurricane the most.
Continue to do the right thing in every circumstance. I believe it brings me closer to Him.
Is it always easy to recognize God's voice in your life?
And how do you know?
I don't think it's very easy to hear God's voice in your life because sometimes you just don't want to, you know? And I think the first time I actually heard God's voice was when I was lying down in my bed one night and I couldn't go to sleep. My grandmother had just died a few years before, and I was missing her, and I was just aching still. I hadn't yet gotten used to the fact she wasn't in our house. And so God gave me the chance to see her again by letting her come and visit me in my room. And she was escorted down to my room by 2 angels. And basically I felt that was God telling me that everything is going to be okay. Like, even though your grandmother was taken from you, like, don't worry, like, you can move on from this. So it was like my moment of happiness, my moment of, like, I can relax from this, I can calm down, I can move on.
Yeah, I think also, like, in the world today, like, we move so fast and, like, we're all worried about, like, oh, who's texting us or what's the next party we have to go to. It's kind of hard for us to really, like, listen and recognize God's voice because we're worried about the social scene or, like, who's texting us or, like I said before. So, I mean, it's just, sometimes we just need to just get away from all the distractions of our everyday life.
And I don't think you realize God until you step back and notice that He was speaking to you that whole time.
Sure.
I don't think it's easy to notice God's voice right away, but maybe in a couple hours or even days you realize, like, oh, wait, maybe that was God, like, giving me a sign or letting me know that He was with me. Like, I don't think it's something you realize right away.
Yeah, I don't think you can realize it until the situation plays out and you're looking back at it, because in the moment, like I said earlier, like, sometimes it's my friends. So I'll just think they're giving me an answer, but then later when it plays out and I realize, like, that's what I was looking for, I'll look back on it and then I'll say, oh, that was God speaking to me.
There are many ways God speaks to us, but there are also many competing voices out there.
The closer we grow to God in prayer, the more we will recognize His voice in everything we do.
Our spotlight guest, Aubrey, was a popular student at her high school in Arizona.
She was a cheerleader and a student council president her senior year of high school, and she was questioning her path in life.
But it was through prayer that God gave her the answers she was seeking during an adoration experience on the Steubenville retreat.
Let's find out about the plan God placed before her.
So I went to Steubenville the summer before going into my senior year. And when I was praying, He kind of just showed me, it was like a vision of me, you know, helping students. Mostly they were, like, by themselves and didn't have a lot of friends. Just lunchtime, like, I know I've seen, like, tons of kids sit alone, but I would just sit with all my friends in the student council room or be with my cheer friends or doing something when I could have been reaching out to other students. So I kind of just started going around and introducing myself to those kids and sitting with them at lunch. And at first they were kind of just, like, off-put by it because it's so unexpected. And sometimes when I go sit next to people, they weren't friendly at all. But it was okay. I was just really nice to them, and I knew that's what I was supposed to be doing, so I just did it. I actually brought the idea up to student council. I said, we're student council, we're supposed to represent the school. We should sit with kids that don't have friends and welcome them and make them feel like they want to be a part of the school. They thought it was a good idea, but to actually go out and do it is another thing. So it kind of took a while to implement that. Some of the kids didn't want to do it, they didn't feel uncomfortable. And I didn't push them to do anything they felt super uncomfortable doing. As simple as it sounds, just to go sit next to someone, it's actually like a very difficult thing for people to do. And I got like 20 other kids to do that during lunch, and it kind of made our school more welcoming for a lot of students. I thought it would be a lot easier to reach out to students that didn't have a lot of friends, but it was actually a little bit more difficult. It took a lot more time to get to know them, and they were kind of untrusting. They didn't know if I was like making fun of them by sitting by them or if I was actually being genuine. So that was a struggle, but eventually when we got past that, I'm still friends with a lot of the kids that I've met. And I don't think that like they're completely different from me at all. I just feel like I never had the opportunity to meet them because they're probably a little bit more shy. And I'm pretty outgoing, and I'll say hi to anyone and talk to anyone. It's kind of what God did. He sat with their people who didn't have as many friends, so people will be like, why is Aubrey sitting with those kids? You know, it's kind of out of the ordinary for me to do that. So it kind of shocked people, but I felt like that's what God was telling me to do.
Have you guys ever had that God moment where you knew it was obvious that God was placing something on your heart?
Well, I had mine, I want to say this morning, actually. My uncle today had to take his dog to be put down. And I had seen like that he was obviously upset about it this morning. And in situations like that, I don't know how to react to people. And like I knew he was upset and I wanted to say something, but I didn't. I just left that house. And as soon as I got in my car, I sat there for a moment, and I don't really know why, and I wasn't really thinking about anything in particular, but I had the feeling that God was there and he was telling me, you know, you didn't need to say anything, you know, and like it was almost reassurance that it was okay for me to drive away.
A time that I had a God moment is when I went on a field trip, a service trip actually, with my school to a visitation home, which is a place where older mentally handicapped people live and they stay. And it was right after prom, so we did a fashion show for them. We all got dressed up and did a little fashion show. And after the fashion show, we all got to dance with the residents. And one of the residents came up to me and said, hey, do you have a best friend? And I said, yeah, I have a best friend. And they're like, well, everybody in this room is my best friend. And I was actually in a fight with somebody that day, and I felt like God sent me that person to let me know that I need to forgive them and move on, and I need to be as selfless as these people.
Yeah, and a God moment for me was when we had baseball tryouts this year, and so my friend who like was in the same like class as me, he tried out and like he didn't make it, but he wanted to be on the team like so bad, and was like he was probably the most disappointed when he found out that he didn't make it, but I made it. So I tried the next day in school. I tried to like reach out to him and say, oh, don't worry about it. I mean, there's always next year, you know what I mean? Like to be positive, and I think he kind of took that advice kind of well. And I heard like it must have gotten back to my coach, because my coach was like, oh, that was really good of you to like kind of pick him up after he was down. And so I kind of felt like God sent me to be that symbol of God in his life. So that was really a God moment for me.
One of the biggest God moments I ever had was I have the opportunity on Tuesdays during the school year to go teach at a school in Asbury Park, New Jersey. And this kid, Michael, we were doing English lessons, and he was spelling words for me, and out of nowhere he said, do you have running water at your house? I was like, whoa, yeah, I have running water. He goes, well, I don't at my house. And then he like finished writing the word, and then he goes, do you have food at your house? I go, yeah, I have food at my house. He goes, but I don't have food at my house. This lunch you give me is the biggest lunch I ever eat. And I was like, oh my gosh. So like I was nearly in tears, and that was my God moment, like that made me realize how lucky I am to have everything I do.
In the Gospel of John, chapter 10, Jesus tells us,
my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me.
Following Christ is a key part of learning to hear his voice.
And the Bible is a powerful tool to show us how to be faithful followers.
We can be transformed when we read, dwell, and meditate on God's words.
Next, Aubrey shares with us how her experience on retreat brought her closer to God.
And how she was able to relate this newfound relationship with God to Christ's teachings in the gospel.
It brought me closer to God because it gave me a lot of trust, because I didn't know if I went out and talked to kids if I was just going to be mocked or made fun of, or they were just going to tell me to go away. So I had a lot of faith on going out on a whim and just doing it, and there's a lot of things in the Bible that kind of relate to my story, and it's interesting how even though that happened so long ago, it's still present today, and things that we do and the messages still apply to our life, and there's a lot of things you can take from the Bible, and it made me actually a happier person. So as I was so stressed out about what to do with my life at that time, I feel like it showed me where to go. It helped a lot of kids that probably needed that attention or like time in their life, because you never know what someone else is going through, and you don't know if like just a few seconds from our student council coming up to talking to a kid made a difference in someone's life. That I'll never know what would have happened if we didn't go up and talk to them.
In St. Paul's letter to the Hebrews, chapter 4, he tells us that the Word of God is living and effective.
This means that Scripture has the power to deepen our everyday experiences.
We know he also speaks to us in the sacraments because Christ is fully present in Mass and confession.
Sometimes all it takes is a moment of quiet in the simplest of surroundings to feel God's Word.
Let's go back to Aubrey, where she shares some advice on how we can allow God to speak to us.
And how adoration is an excellent opportunity for dedicated one-on-one time with God.
I felt like I was not given any instructions. I was like, what am I doing? I go to church all the time, every Sunday, and I don't hear God speak to me at all. And I know exactly how that feels, so I would probably just tell them to probably pay more attention to what God's showing you, because sometimes we miss things that God's trying to tell us, and it's not always going to come with a thundering voice of God coming down and saying, you need to do this with your life, and here it is. Sometimes you have to do a little bit more digging and do some more work with God to figure out where you need to be. Sometimes it's a feeling, and sometimes it's just like a sign. They'll see something, and I think you'll just know because you just have a feeling of peace and you're content when you hear God speak to you. Adoration is a tool that I use to become closer with God, and we have a chapel that's not too far from my house. It's open 24 hours, and I've gone there many times in the past few years when I just was having a hard day or the hard times of my life, and I can go there for hours and just pray, and it benefits me a lot. So I think you just don't have to force it. I think if you just ask God to show you where you need to be, that he'll do that for you. You just got to trust in him, and if you don't hear it the first time, don't get discouraged, because I didn't hear God speak to me for a while, but I think if you definitely go to confession and stay close to God, you'll hear what he's trying to tell you.
As we develop our prayer lives, we need to surrender to God our own expectations for how we want to hear him.
God works with each soul differently.
Some people hear God in prayer every morning.
Some hear him through others, through music, through nature.
But there are still those who struggle with maintaining a prayer life or having any type of communication with God.
It is important to understand that our Christian witness has the power to motivate and challenge others and build up their own relationships with God.
Finally, Aubrey addresses how young people have difficulty responding to God's call.
And how we can be instruments of change and bring others closer to Christ.
I think people have a difficult time answering God's call because we probably would have to change our lives, and I think change is hard for people, and people don't want to change. They're comfortable in their own shell and they don't want to know, so they kind of just ignore it. Like if they don't know, they ignore it, they don't talk to God, then they don't have to change because they're not at fault for knowing. If you really want to be closer to God, you're going to have to change your life. The advice I have for people who are trying to listen for God, that you need to build a relationship with God. I mean, God's always going to be there for you, but if you want a healthy and strong relationship with God, just like you would do with any relationship, you can't ignore the person or you can't like expect them to always hang out with you. You need to go to church every Sunday, you go to communion and go to confession. All those things are a part of having a relationship with God, and developing a relationship is probably the best thing to do if you're trying to listen for God. I don't feel like it was strange that I felt God talk to me. I think it's something that everyone should try to get to in their life. Everyone can get to that place in their life to have a spiritual relationship. I'm going to college and I still am praying about where I'm supposed to be because I've been back and forth on where I'm supposed to go. He's shown me where not to go. Right now I'm just in school and I'm studying mass communications and journalism. And that's just what I'm interested in, but I mean, I could see him taking me anywhere at this point, and you just have to be open to it, so I have faith that God will show me wherever I need to be.
What are some ways we could show to others that God is truly present in their lives?
I think we could show others that God is present in their lives, like helping them through tough times and being there for them no matter what.
Another way would be to just do simple, kind acts to other people, like holding the door open, smiling, going to sit with them at the table if they're sitting by themselves, just to remind them that they're not alone and that they have someone there for them.
Sometimes God doesn't it's not just through voice or other people. I know I always sometimes find God in song. And like you said, in nature, it's those times that you're away from people on a retreat and in nature, in its most simplest form of a human being, that you most recognize God.
My advice is, don't get discouraged. Keep your head up. Take things one step at a time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I really like that song by Andy Grammer called Keep Your Head Up.
The more we grow closer in Christ, the more we actually let go of our ideas and conform our hearts to God's will.
If He is silent, we accept that silence.
If He is gracing us with peace and love, we accept those gifts.
If He is allowing us to suffer, we unite that suffering to Him.
These are all acts of surrender, which are necessary to grow in our prayer life.
May we have the grace to hear God however He speaks to us and to grow deeper in a relationship with Him.
So how have you heard God speak to you?
Contact us at realfaithtv.com.
Or send us a tweet.
And finally, in Psalm 46, we are reminded that God speaks to us in the stillness.
King David writes, "Be still and know that I'm God."
So make space in your life for the quiet,
where we are free from distraction,
and open up to hearing God's voice speaking to us in the depths of our hearts.
Thanks for watching.
We'll see you next time on
Real Faith TV. God bless.